When I saw her hand hovering over the papers, my heart skipped, and I knew something wasn't right. That's how it began. I was sitting in the small, sunlit corner of our local bank, the smell of polished wood and faint printer ink filling the air. My daughter, Lena, was perched beside me, her phone buzzing incessantly as she shuffled through the stack of forms in front of us. The clerk behind the counter, a young woman with a calm, practiced smile, was waiting patiently, glancing up every so often at Lena's hurried movements. Lena's tone was clipped, almost rehearsed. Just sign here, here, and here, Mom. Don't worry about reading everything. It's fine. Her fingers were quick, precise, as if she had done this 100 times before. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her calm exterior. I hesitated, my pen hovering. Something about the urgency, the insistence, felt off. I could feel the warmth of her hand on mine as she nudged the papers closer. I wanted to trust her. After all, she was my daughter. But the note I had found earlier that morning, tucked carelessly under her laptop, words scrawled in a handwriting I recognized but didn't want to fully believe, lingered in my mind. The bank was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the clicking of keyboards behind glass partitions. I could hear the faint squeak of shoes against the polished floor as customers moved about, but all my attention was on Lena and the stack of papers. Mom, seriously, just sign, she said again, sharper this time. Her phone pinged. She glanced at it, then back at the papers. We don't have all day. The words felt like a warning, though I couldn't say why. I looked at the clerk, hoping she might just distract Lena long enough for me to figure out what was really going on. The woman gave me a soft, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes flicking down at the note I had clutched in my bag. Somehow, she had seen it. It was a simple slip of paper, folded twice, with a message that made my stomach drop, make her sign everything. She doesn't need to read. Hurry. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around my pen. The calm of the bank contrasted sharply with the storm building inside me. My daughter, my own child, had written this? And now she was trying to make me sign without understanding what I was agreeing to? Lena, my voice was softer than I intended, almost pleading. Why do you need me to sign everything without reading it? She froze for a moment, and I saw her smile falter. Her hands paused over the documents. For the first time that morning, she looked uncertain. The cashier, patient and composed, leaned slightly forward, her eyes scanning the papers in front of me. Ma'am, she said gently, I think you should read this first. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was quiet, firm, almost protective. Lena's lips parted, but no words came out immediately. She was caught off guard, the kind of shock that comes when a carefully constructed plan encounters an unexpected obstacle. I felt my own pulse hammering in my ears, a mix of fear and disbelief, as the reality began to settle in. This wasn't just a hurried errand or a misunderstanding. Something deeper, something deliberate, was at play. The clerk's eyes met mine again, silently affirming what I already suspected. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, heavier than the stack of papers in front of us. I had to make a choice, whether to confront her here, in the calm of the bank, or to retreat and understand the full story before emotions took over. I took a deep breath, the scent of freshly polished counters and faint coffee from the bank's tiny kiosk filling my senses. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the top document. I unfolded the top sheet slowly, as if the act itself could give me more time to prepare. The words blurred at first, official terms, numbers, account details, but then my eyes caught something that made my chest tighten. Hidden in the corner of the form, almost as if someone hoped it would go unnoticed, were instructions about transferring funds I didn't recognize, accounts I had never opened. Lena's hand hovered over mine again, eager, insistent. Mom, just. No, my voice was firmer than I expected, cutting through the small hum of the bank. I could feel the heads of a few nearby customers turn subtly, their curiosity masked behind polite glances. I need to read this. All of it. She hesitated. That flicker of panic crossed her face, so brief I might have imagined it, except it was real. I knew my daughter well enough to read every micro-expression, every tiny twitch that betrayed her calm exterior. The clerk watched silently, her hands folded neatly in front of her, the kind of stillness that somehow added gravity to the moment. Finally, she spoke, soft but unmistakably firm. "It's okay to read, ma'am. You have every right to know what you're signing." Something in her tone grounded me. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting a small familial deception, I was about to uncover a decision that could have long-lasting consequences. My eyes went back to Lena. "Mom, it's nothing, she faltered. Her usual assuredness crumbled, replaced by a quiet desperation. "I just thought." "Thought what?" I pressed, my voice calm, but the ache in my chest made my hands tremble. I wanted answers. Not excuses. Not hurried reassurances. Answers. Lena looked down at the papers, and for a moment, the bustling bank, the clicking keyboards, even the faint murmur of other customers faded. It was just the two of us, suspended in the tension that had been building for weeks, maybe months, and I had been blind to it. "You didn't tell me," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't tell me you were moving money without explaining why." Her eyes filled with something I couldn't immediately name, guilt, fear, maybe a trace of resentment. "Mom. I thought I was helping. I didn't want you to worry." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Helping? By writing a note telling me not to read, to sign blindly?" My heart pounded with disbelief. This wasn't about bank forms or finances, this was about trust. My own daughter, the person I had taught to walk with integrity, had tried to bypass me, to manipulate me. The clerk cleared her throat gently, bringing me back to the present. "Ma'am, it looks like some of these transfers are significant. You might want to double-check." I nodded, grateful for her quiet intervention. I took the pen again, this time with deliberate calm. I read every line, every instruction, every detail, and as I did, the pattern emerged. Some of it was innocent, simple misunderstandings. Perhaps Lena had intended to consolidate accounts or simplify payments. But other parts were deliberate. Funds were being redirected to places I didn't recognize. And the note, that simple, cruel instruction, confirmed what I had been dreading. This was intentional. Lena's gaze met mine, full of pleading now, almost childlike. "Mom, please." But it was too late for pleading. The trust had been fractured, and even if I chose to forgive later, the knowledge of intent, the awareness of betrayal, had already settled like a stone in my chest. I folded the papers slowly, deliberately, and looked up at the clerk. "I think we need to discuss this, carefully. All of it." Lena's shoulders slumped. The confident daughter I had known seemed to shrink in that moment, and I realized that what was coming next wasn't just about money. It was about truth, about honesty, and about facing the decisions that define who we are. The clerk gestured for us to step aside to a quieter corner, away from the few customers who had begun to glance curiously in our direction. Her office was small, neat, and smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. I took a seat, keeping the forms neatly stacked in front of me, my fingers still trembling slightly, not from fear but from the simmering storm of confusion and hurt. Lena sat opposite me, her knees pressed together, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. I studied her closely. This wasn't the daughter I had raised, confident, warm, endlessly patient. This was someone shadowed by fear, someone trying to convince herself she was right while knowing, deep down, she had crossed a line. "Mom," she started, her voice trembling, "I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to fix things before you even noticed." "Fix things?" I interrupted softly, my words deliberate. "By hiding them from me? By writing a note telling me not to read? Lena, do you understand what you did?" Her eyes filled with tears. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, each second stretching unbearably. The clerk didn't intervene, she let us unravel our tangled emotions in her small, quiet office. Her presence was steady, silent, like a lighthouse watching over a stormy sea. I didn't know how to ask, Lena said finally, barely audible. I thought if I handled it, it would all be easier. I didn't want you to worry or say no. The words were meant to soothe, but all I felt was a deeper ache. My daughter had chosen secrecy over honesty, control over trust. It was a betrayal that felt heavier than anything I had anticipated. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. Lena, I said quietly, you've crossed a line. This isn't about money or accounts. This is about trust. It's about the principle of being honest with someone who loves you unconditionally. I paused, letting my words sink in. I could have helped you. I could have guided you. But you chose deception instead. Her shoulders shook as she let out a soft sob. I just didn't want you to be disappointed. I wanted to help. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking softly beneath me. I could hear the faint hum of the bank outside, the occasional murmur of distant voices, and it all felt surreal, like I was watching myself from afar. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, sitting across from me, trying to justify a choice she knew was wrong. The clerk finally spoke, her voice gentle but firm. Sometimes people try to protect their loved ones in the wrong way. It doesn't make it right, but it can help to understand why it happened. I nodded slowly. I didn't yet feel ready to forgive, but I understood. I could see the fear, the desperation, the misguided desire to fix things without consulting me. That was her human flaw, and it hurt like a knife. Mom, Lena whispered, her voice barely above a breath, I'll make it right. I promise. I don't know how yet, but I will. I looked at her, studying every line of her face, every flicker of guilt and hope. My heart ached, a dull, persistent thrum, but underneath it all, I felt the faintest spark of relief. She wasn't malicious. She was misguided, fearful, and deeply flawed. I folded my hands over the papers, feeling the weight of them, not just the financial implications, but the emotional weight of trust, betrayal, and responsibility. We'll see, I said softly, and for the first time that day, I felt a small measure of control return. But first, we need transparency. No more notes. No more shortcuts. We face this together, honestly. Lena nodded slowly, tears streaking her face, and I realized that this was only the beginning. The discovery had happened, the confrontation had begun, but the path to understanding, to repairing the fracture, was just opening before us. We left the bank with the air between us taut, heavy with unspoken words. The sunlight outside felt sharp, almost accusatory, as if the world itself was aware of the tension humming in the space between my daughter and me. I kept the stack of papers close, clutching them like a shield, but also as a reminder that trust, once broken, could not be ignored. Lena walked beside me, hesitant, her usual brisk pace replaced by careful, measured steps. I could feel her eyes on me, trying to gauge my mood, to predict my reaction. She was waiting for the explosion, the angry words, the dramatic confrontation that she probably expected after a discovery like this. But I was calm. Too calm, perhaps, for her to read, which seemed to unsettle her more than anger ever could. Back at home, the kitchen smelled faintly of the stew I had been preparing for dinner. The ticking of the old wall clock was louder than usual, each second a metronome marking the slow unraveling of our morning. I placed the forms on the dining table, smoothing them carefully, and motioned for Lena to sit. Sit, I said, my voice gentle but firm. We need to go through this, line by line. She hesitated, then obeyed, the soft scrape of her chair against the floor echoing through the quiet kitchen. She looked tired, worn, and guilt seemed to weigh down every movement. I poured us both a glass of water, the clink of the glasses loud in the tense silence. I don't understand why you did this, I said finally, breaking the silence. You've always been responsible, careful. You've never tried to manipulate me before. Why now? Lena's hands trembled as she reached for her glass. Mom. I felt cornered. I saw the bills piling up, the accounts in a mess, and I panicked. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. I thought I was helping. Helping doesn't involve deception, I said softly, my voice steady. You wrote a note telling me to sign without reading. That's not help, Lena. That's control. You made a choice to bypass me. She looked down, silent for a long moment, and I could see the tears threatening to spill. I didn't know how else to do it, she admitted finally. I thought if I handled it, everything would be okay. I never wanted to hurt you. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, smelling the faint aroma of spices and simmering stew, grounding myself in the ordinary while confronting the extraordinary breach of trust. You've hurt me, Lena. Not because of the money, that's fixable, but because of the secrecy. Because you didn't trust me enough to come to me openly. Her shoulders shook as the tears fell freely. I do trust you, Mom. I always have. I made a terrible mistake. The words hung in the air, fragile and raw. I could see the weight of guilt pressing down on her, bending her spine, clouding her usually bright eyes. This wasn't just a lesson for her, it was a mirror for me, too. A reminder that sometimes love requires patience, even when the betrayal cuts deep. I reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. Mistakes are part of life, Lena. But understanding them, facing them, that's how we grow. You'll have to fix this, and you will, step by step. But first, honesty. No more secrets, no more rushed decisions. She nodded, gripping my hand tightly, as if holding on to the possibility of redemption itself. I felt a faint glimmer of hope. The betrayal had been real, the hurt undeniable, but in that moment, I also saw the first cracks of reconciliation beginning to form. The night stretched on, and we went through every document, every transaction, every note of confusion or error. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but necessary. By the time we finished, the sun had dipped low, painting the kitchen in warm orange light. And somewhere in that quiet, meticulous work, the tension began to ease, just slightly, replaced by understanding, fragile, but real. The next morning, I woke to the familiar sounds of our neighborhood, birds calling softly, distant traffic, the faint hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. But my mind was anything but calm. I knew that today, I had to take action. Not in anger, not in revenge, but with careful thought and resolve. I had to ensure that what happened yesterday would never repeat itself, and that Lena would understand the gravity of her choices fully. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, grounding me in the ordinary while my thoughts raced through the extraordinary. Lena was quiet, sitting at the table, sipping tea, fidgeting with her cup as if it held the answers to her guilt. I could feel her apprehension, the weight of expectation pressing down on her, and I knew this was her moment of reckoning. Lena, I said softly, I've spent the morning thinking. We need a plan, not just for the accounts, but for trust. For transparency. For the future. Her eyes lifted, hope and fear mingling in equal measure. I'll do anything, Mom. I want to make this right. I nodded, feeling a surge of both pride and sorrow. Pride because she was willing to confront her mistakes, sorrow because it had come to this point. We'll go through every transaction again, together. Every transfer, every payment. You'll explain every decision, and we'll correct what's wrong. No shortcuts. She swallowed hard and began. The words were hesitant at first, then gained momentum as she recounted her actions, her thought process, her fears. She spoke of bills she thought were urgent, transfers she believed were harmless, accounts she tried to consolidate, all done without consulting me. Each explanation was accompanied by remorse, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. But it wasn't enough to just fix the financial errors. There had to be a consequence, a lesson that would linger. I decided it was time for a conversation she wouldn't forget. Lena, I said, keeping my tone calm, measured, you need to face the reality of what could have happened. If this had gone unnoticed, if the clerk hadn't intervened, if I had blindly signed, we could have lost a significant portion of our savings. Do you understand that? Her lips trembled, and she nodded. I see it now. I see how reckless I was. Good, I replied. Because trust isn't just about feelings, it's about responsibility. About understanding that our actions, even with good intentions, have consequences. She looked down, biting her lip, tears forming again. I could feel the tension slowly giving way to acceptance, the storm inside her beginning to settle. But I wasn't done. To fully understand this, you're going to work with me on organizing every financial detail. You'll double-check accounts, reconcile transfers, and create a transparent plan going forward. No shortcuts, no hiding, no notes telling me not to read. She nodded, almost eagerly this time. Relief mixed with determination, and I felt a flicker of hope. The task would be long and meticulous, but it would teach her discipline, patience, and honesty, lessons money alone cannot provide. As we sat together, sorting through bank statements and receipts, I realized that this was more than just a lesson about finance. It was a lesson about life, about the fragile nature of trust, and the care we must take with the hearts of those we love. Lena's hands shook at first, but gradually steadied as we worked, side by side, the silence now productive rather than tense. By mid-afternoon, we had uncovered all errors, corrected misdirected funds, and developed a clear plan for the future. I watched her, exhausted but focused, and felt a quiet pride. The betrayal had been painful, but perhaps it was also the moment that would shape her into someone more conscientious, more aware, more trustworthy. And I knew, as I sipped my coffee and watched her work, that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, slowly, patiently, with honesty and effort from both sides. A week later, the ripple effects of that day at the bank began to reach beyond the quiet walls of our home. Lena had been diligent, working with me to reconcile every account, double-check every transaction, and ensure that every decision going forward would be transparent. But what surprised me most was how word of the incident, though unintentionally, had begun to circulate. It started with the bank itself. The clerk, a quiet woman named Sarah, had confided gently to a few colleagues that a customer had been almost misled by a family member. She had not shared names, but the story traveled through whispered conversations and curious inquiries. By the time the week ended, a few acquaintances of mine, those who frequented the same branch, had caught wind of the situation with the daughter trying to push her mother to sign blindly. At first, I felt a sharp prick of embarrassment, the kind that makes you shrink inwardly. I didn't want my family drama broadcast even in subtle whispers. But as the days passed, I noticed something else, a shift in perception. People weren't gossiping to mock or condemn us. They were sharing a cautionary tale about honesty, vigilance, and integrity. Lena felt it too. One afternoon, as we sat in the living room reviewing the last of the corrected forms, she said softly, "Mom, I've noticed some of our neighbors giving me these looks. I think they know what happened." I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of the social consequences. Yes, they do. But that's not necessarily bad. Sometimes the consequences of our actions teach lessons beyond our home. This is about accountability, not shame. We began to receive small gestures of support as well, quiet nods from neighbors when we passed on the street, a few friendly inquiries from acquaintances asking if everything was all right. The truth had made its way into the public sphere, and instead of humiliation, it brought reflection. People respected the way we handled the situation, confronting it openly, correcting mistakes, and ensuring transparency. Even within our family circle, there were subtle changes. Relatives who had always treated finances lightly began consulting me more carefully, asking questions, learning the importance of clarity. Lena, once the youngest and perhaps the most impulsive, became an example of accountability. Her willingness to confront her errors openly and work diligently restored not only my trust but also her reputation within our circle. One evening, a close family friend dropped by, casually commenting as we served tea, "I heard about the bank incident. It sounds like you handled it with grace." Many wouldn't have. I felt a quiet warmth spread through me, a validation not of pride, but of principle. Integrity had been tested, and it had endured. The public acknowledgement of our situation didn't bring humiliation or ridicule, it brought understanding and a subtle, collective lesson. Lena faced the moral weight of her actions, without dramatics, without punishment beyond the work required to make amends, and the people around us saw that accountability could be dignified, humane, and transformative. I watched my daughter grow in those days. The subtle shift in her demeanor, humility replacing impulsiveness, careful thought replacing urgency, was proof that consequences, when approached constructively, can lead to growth rather than bitterness. She had faced the mirror of public scrutiny and emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the responsibilities that come with trust. By the end of that week, the accounts were fully corrected, the paperwork properly signed, and the sense of tension that had gripped our home lifted. The lesson, however, lingered, not just for Lena, but for me, for our family, and perhaps for anyone who had quietly observed the situation. Honesty, transparency, and accountability are the foundations of trust, and when tested, they reveal the character of those involved. The days that followed felt quieter, lighter, as if the storm we had weathered was slowly moving away. In the mornings, I would sit with my coffee, watching the sun stream through the kitchen window, while Lena prepared breakfast with a newfound calm in her movements. The house, once heavy with tension, now carried a soft warmth, the kind that comes from the slow rebuilding of trust. Lena had taken it upon herself to document every transaction, every bill, every transfer. I noticed she no longer rushed through anything, and her careful attention made me realize that the lesson had truly sunk in. She was learning, growing, and carrying the weight of accountability without resentment. One afternoon, we sat together at the table, the last of the bank forms neatly filed away. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, even the distant sounds of children playing outside, they all seemed to emphasize the ordinary peace that had returned. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the mixture of relief and reflection on her face. "I want to thank you, Mom," she said softly, her voice almost shy. "For not yelling, for not just shutting me out. For giving me a chance to fix this." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers, feeling the small tremor that was once fear now replaced with determination. "Lena," I said gently, "I did it because I knew you were capable of understanding, of learning. Mistakes don't define us, how we respond to them does." Her eyes filled with tears, and I realized that this was the healing part. The moment when remorse is met with patience, when guidance replaces anger, and when love becomes the bridge to redemption. Over the next few weeks, our routines resumed their familiar rhythm. We cooked meals together, laughed over small mistakes in the kitchen, and shared quiet moments of conversation. The financial chaos was behind us, but the emotional lessons remained vivid. Lena had transformed in subtle ways, her confidence now tempered with caution, her eagerness softened by mindfulness. I also noticed a shift in myself. I had learned patience, the value of calm confrontation, and the importance of giving space for growth, even when hurt runs deep. Our relationship, once strained by secrecy and tension, now had a new layer, one forged in honesty, accountability, and understanding. One evening, as we cleared the dinner dishes, Lena looked at me with a softness I hadn't seen before. "Mom," she said, almost hesitantly, "I think I understand now. Trust isn't just about following rules. It's about being open, about respecting the other person enough to let them in." I nodded, my heart swelling with quiet pride. Exactly. And that's a lesson worth carrying for life. That night, as I tucked away the last forms in a locked cabinet, a symbol of both order and regained trust, I felt a deep sense of closure. The betrayal, the shock, the tension, it had all been real. But so was the healing. So was the growth. So was the love that had withstood the test of secrecy and fear. Lena and I sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting warm shadows around us. We didn't need to speak, the silence was comfortable, full of understanding and renewed connection. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I felt a peace that wasn't just about resolving a crisis, but about nurturing the bond that had been tested and proven resilient. I realized then that healing doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, deliberate, and sometimes painful. But it is possible. And when it comes, it brings with it a clarity and warmth that makes the struggle worthwhile. Sitting by the window that evening, I watched the last light of the day fade into soft twilight. The house was quiet, the hum of the city beyond our walls distant and unobtrusive. I thought about the past week, the panic, the confrontation, the meticulous work of restoring both our finances and our trust. And I realized how fragile trust is, yet how resilient it can become when met with patience, honesty, and love. Lena came and sat beside me, her presence calm and unassuming. She didn't need to say anything, her quiet sincerity spoke volumes. In that moment, I understood something important. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing mistakes. It's about recognizing intent, understanding human flaws, and choosing to nurture growth rather than dwell on error. I thought about the clerk at the bank, whose gentle intervention had prevented a greater mistake, and I felt a wave of gratitude for the people who quietly help us navigate life's turning points. Sometimes, the difference between disaster and learning is someone's careful observation, a soft voice urging us to pause and reflect. Looking at my daughter, I felt both pride and humility. She had made a grave error, yes, but she had faced it honestly, and in doing so, had grown. And I had learned too, patience, restraint, and the power of measured guidance. Life often tests us in unexpected ways, and it's in those moments that our true character is revealed. I turned to the audience now, reflecting quietly, as if sharing a truth from one family to another. Trust is delicate, mistakes are inevitable, but integrity and communication can restore what was broken. When someone you love falters, how will you respond? Will you react with anger, or will you guide with understanding? Life is full of these small, pivotal moments. Sometimes they arrive in the form of a hurried note, a whispered instruction, or a choice made in fear. What matters is how we respond, with patience, with reflection, and with courage. Would you have done what I did? Would you have paused, read the note, confronted the truth, and chosen healing over anger? Think about it, and share your thoughts. Because every story has a lesson, and every lesson is stronger when it's shared.